This is a reading from the Diary of Saint Gemma Galgani. I'll read the back cover first. She bore in her flesh the wounds of Christ, Pope Pius XI. From 1899 until her death in 1903, the young Italian woman, Saint Gemma Galgani, physically experienced the wounds of Christ every Thursday evening. The stigmata would appear and bleed on her hands, feet, and side, stopping only on Friday afternoon and leaving white marks as a reminder. Saint Gemma also experienced countless visions, raptures, ecstasies, and other mystical graces, as well as intense temptations from the devil. Here is the remarkable diary of this young saint that her spiritual director ordered her to write. It will give you an enthralling glimpse into her numerous encounters with Jesus crucified, with Our Lady, and with her guardian angel, whom she saw almost every day and would even send on errands, usually to deliver messages to her confessor in Rome. You will witness Saint Gemma's courage in fulfilling even laborious duties while wearing the hidden crown of thorns, and you will learn what Saint Gabriel Possenti, to whom she was especially devoted, taught her about the connection between bodily illness and spiritual healing. Moreover, Saint Gemma will teach you what to do when you are mocked, tormented, or experience powerful temptations, how to overcome the hesitation to receive Holy Communion due to scrupulosity, dryness, and desolation, the key to overcoming struggles in prayer, how obedience will defeat the enemy and help you overcome sinful habits, how your prayers and small sufferings relieve souls in purgatory, how to remain faithful during periods of intense suffering. Saint Gemma Galgani, 1878 till 1903, was a laywoman who lived near Lucca, Italy. She yearned to be a Passionist nun, but her poor health prevented this. Instead, she was mystically espoused to Jesus and faithfully lived out the Passionist spirituality. The Diary of Saint Gemma. Part 1. The Autobiography of Saint Gemma Galgani. Translator's Preface. Okay. Many years ago, when I was a young priest, I had the good fortune of studying for a time in Rome. During that time, I lived with the Passionist community at their central house in Rome, St. John and Paul. This was an international community of Passionists, but largely Italian, and the language of the house was Italian. As a result, I ended my stay in Rome with at least some knowledge of the Italian language. I returned to the States with many memories, and with a desire to put my acquired knowledge of Italian to some practical use. Among many other Roman experiences, I had come into more direct contact with the person and the writings of Saint Gemma Galgani. Gemma was a young laywoman who desired ardently to become a Passionist nun, but God never granted this desire. Through her close association with the Passionists, however, she earned a treasured place among the Passionist family, as so many others have done through the years. I found that I had fallen under the spell of Saint Gemma, and so, when it came to a way of putting my knowledge of Italian to use, I naturally thought of doing something with the writings of Saint Gemma, which, until that time, remained locked in the Italian, at least as far as English readers were concerned. It may be a cause of surprise for many, even now, to learn that this humble and hidden saint wrote a great deal. There are 2 large volumes of her writings published in Italian. One volume, Lettere di Saint Gemma Galgani, contains 459 pages of her letters alone. Another, Estasi, Diario, Autobiografia, Scritti Vari di Gemma Galgani, contains 316 pages of her other writings. One does not have to read far in either of these volumes to be completely captivated by the simple and humble saint. Gemma wrote her autobiography at the insistent request of Father Germanus, C.P., who became her spiritual director in January 1900, approximately 3 years before her death. At first, he directed his spiritual daughter by letter, coming to Lucca to see her for the first time in September 1900. He found Gemma writing a diary of the graces she received day by day. She was writing this diary under obedience to her regular confessor, Monsignor Volpi, auxiliary bishop of Lucca. Judging on general principles that it was not good to concentrate to such an extent on what was happening within, Father Germanus ordered her to stop and made her hand over to him all that she had written. But later, as he read the diary, he realized that while the principles on which he had acted was true, it did not apply to Gemma's case. He realized, in short, that he was dealing with a most extraordinary person. In order to remedy this mistake, he asked her to write for him a general confession of all her sins, that he might be better able to direct her. He knew that she could not write of her sins without telling the graces that made them appear so great to her. Gemma complied with this wish, though with great reluctance, as is indicated by the autobiography itself. In her letters, Gemma always refers to this document as her general confession. At the same time, however, it is evident that she did not look upon it as a sacramental confession. At least twice in the pages of the autobiography, she passes over points explaining that she will tell him in confession. The autobiography thus written in obedience to Father Germanus filled 93 pages of a notebook, all written in her own hand. It covers the years from her infancy until September 1900, when she was 22 years old. She began writing the autobiography on February 17, 1901, and finished it in May of the same year. Since she died 2 years later, on April 11, 1903, it does not cover the last 2 years of her life. The manuscript copy of the autobiography still exists and is on display at St. John and Paul in Rome. Gemma's beautiful handwriting is still plain, but a remarkable fact about the notebook is that every page has the appearance of having been burned. Father Germanus explains this phenomenon in his life of St. Gemma. Gemma's manuscript, when finished, was by my orders given to the charge of her adopted mother, Signora Cecilia Giannini, who kept it hidden in a drawer awaiting the first opportunity of handing it to me. Some days elapsed, and Gemma thought she saw the demon pass through the window of her room where the drawer was, chuckling, and then disappear into the air. Accustomed as she was to such apparitions, she thought nothing of it. But he, having returned shortly after to molest her, as often happened, with a repulsive temptation, and having failed, left, gnashing his teeth and declaring exultantly, "War, war, your book is in my hands." So she wrote to tell me. Then, owing to the obedience that she was under to disclose to her vigilant benefactress everything extraordinary that happened to her, she thought she was obliged to tell her what had occurred. They went, opened the drawer, and found that the book was no longer there. I was written to at once, and it was easy to imagine my consternation at having lost such a treasure. What was to be done? I thought a great deal about it, and just then, while at the tomb of Blessed Gabriel of the Dolors, a fresh idea came to my mind. I resolved to exorcise the devil and thus force him to return the manuscript if he had really taken it. With my ritual stole and holy water, I went to the tomb of the Blessed Servant of God, and there, although nearly 400 miles from Lucca, I pronounced the exorcism in regular form. God seconded my ministry, and at the same hour, the writing was restored to the place from which it had been taken several days before. But in what state? The pages from top to bottom were all smoked and parts burned, as if each one had been separately exposed over a strong fire. Yet they were not so badly burned as to destroy the writing. This document, having thus passed through a hellfire, is in my hands. Having seen the autobiography as it is preserved today, I can witness personally the evidence described by Father Germanus. We leave it to the reader to judge why the devil was so jealous of this document. My translation of the autobiography was published in 2 places at the time, in The Passionist, July 1954, and in Cross and Crown, June and September 1955. It gives me much pleasure that the autobiography of St. Gemma is being republished in its present form. One final note. In both of the above publications, the name Columban Browning, C.P., was given as the translator. Sometime after that, I returned to my baptismal name, Reverend William Browning, C.P.